As the sun began to sink over the distant hills of our colony, casting a warm but eerie glow over the landscape, we felt the distinct, heavy feeling of dread. It wasn't new. For weeks, rumors had been spreading about a powerful force moving through the galaxy, consuming entire worlds. The stories that trickled through were sparse, but they all painted the same picture: a species without mercy, a race of beings with advanced technology capable of crushing anything in their path. Our small colony, nestled on the edge of the Milky Way, was ill-equipped to face such a threat. Our people were engineers, scientists, explorers. We had left behind the idea of war centuries ago, confident that peace was the only future. Now we were terrified. For the first time in our history, we felt small, vulnerable, and powerless. When our team arrived at the neighboring colony, they were met with looks of gratitude and disbelief. We weren't the humans they might have hoped for, but we were there, ready to protect them. Our guardians set up defenses, communicated strategies, and offered comfort to the fearful residents. The alien fleet that threatened them was not as large as the one we had faced, but it was still a formidable force. As our people prepared to stand their ground, they felt a rush of the same determination they had seen in the human pilots. They were no longer just engineers or scientists, they were defenders, standing between their friends and danger. The battle was intense but brief. The sight of our united force seemed to take the attackers by surprise, and their resolve wavered. They retreated quickly, leaving behind a silence that felt almost surreal. As our guardians helped the neighboring colony recover, they saw the same awe and gratitude in their eyes that we had felt when the humans had saved us. And in that moment it all felt worthwhile: the training, the fear, the commitment to something greater than ourselves. We had not only learned to protect, we had become protectors. And as we looked back at the colony we had helped, we knew that this was just the beginning. When the first ship appeared on the horizon, gliding like a silent predator over the plains, we scrambled to organize a response. The colony's alarms blared, and people rushed to the shelters, clutching their loved ones, uncertain if those underground rooms could withstand what was coming. We looked to our leaders, but they too wore expressions of helplessness. How could we defend ourselves against a threat so advanced? We knew it was only a matter of time before they struck, and as the hours passed, hope drained from us. We waited, hearts pounding, breath shallow, for the inevitable assault. Our minds were flooded with questions, memories, and regrets. But then a faint glimmer of an idea surfaced among us, a long shot, barely more than a whisper of hope. Humans. The humans might be able to help. They were known to be fighters, protectors, a race that thrived on resilience and determination. But would they come? Our leaders sent a desperate plea into the stars, broadcasting across all channels, hoping the humans would intercept it. Time slowed to a crawl as we awaited any sign that someone, anyone, had heard us. Days went by, each one filled with mounting anxiety and fear. The alien forces circled our planet, close enough for us to see the size of their ships. We saw the dark, ominous markings on their hulls, like the brands of predators staking their claim. Finally, when we were beginning to believe that all hope was lost, the message came through. A human fleet was on its way. The relief that washed over us was overwhelming, but it was tinged with a new kind of tension. Would the humans really be able to stand up against this force? Could they protect us when we couldn't protect ourselves? Word of our actions spread across the nearby systems. Other colonies reached out, expressing admiration and, in some cases, requests for assistance. It was clear that our reputation was growing, and with it, a sense of responsibility we hadn't anticipated. We were becoming a symbol, a beacon of hope for those who lived on the edges of known space. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknowns, but we were no longer afraid. We knew that, just as the humans had stood for us, we would stand for others. And perhaps one day we might even stand side by side with them, united by a shared purpose. As time went on, we found ourselves facing new challenges and new threats. Each one tested us, pushing us to our limits, but also reminding us of why we had chosen this path. Every battle, every rescue, every act of kindness strengthened the bonds within our colony and between us and the wider galaxy. We had learned from the humans that strength wasn't just about power, it was about courage, about standing up even when the odds were against you. And as we looked to the stars, we knew that we were no longer alone. When the human ships arrived, we were struck by how small they looked in comparison to the alien fleet. They were swift and sleek, with an efficiency and focus that spoke of countless battles faced and won. They didn't come with banners or grand displays, they came prepared for action, in a formation that was both disciplined and intimidating. It was clear they knew what they were up against, and they had no intention of backing down. Over the comms, we heard the steady, calm voices of human commanders issuing orders. There was a kind of confidence in their tone, an assurance that made our hearts beat a little steadier. Even though they were outnumbered, the humans didn't seem afraid. They seemed ready. Months turned into years, and the memory of the humans' intervention became woven into the fabric of our colony's history. Our people talked about that day with a mixture of pride and awe, recounting every detail of the human fleet's arrival and the bravery they displayed. The children who had once played at being soldiers were now the first generation trained in our defense force, their skills honed in simulations inspired by human tactics and strategy. They wore insignias on their uniforms as a quiet tribute to our human allies, a symbol of the strength and resilience we had learned from them. And as we faced new challenges, we found that our courage, once dormant, was now woven into the essence of our community. The battle that unfolded was unlike anything we'd ever seen. The human pilots moved with precision and skill, evading blasts and retaliating with a fury that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. Their tactics were strange to us, unpredictable, as if they had honed them in conflicts across 100 different worlds. Every time the alien ships tried to surround them, the humans broke through, refusing to be boxed in, refusing to let the enemy dictate the fight. They fought like they had something to prove, like each battle was personal. From our hiding places on the surface, we watched in awe as they stood between us and the alien fleet, refusing to yield even an inch of ground. And slowly, miraculously, the tide of the battle began to turn. Our defense force had grown in numbers, attracting volunteers from nearby systems who had heard of our colony's transformation. It wasn't long before we realized that our small colony was becoming a hub of hope and protection for vulnerable worlds nearby. But with that role came new responsibilities, and more importantly, new questions about our own identity. What did it mean to be protectors in a galaxy so vast, where danger could come from any corner of the cosmos? How could we prepare ourselves, not only to defend, but to extend the same compassion and selflessness the humans had shown us? These questions echoed through the minds of our leaders, scientists and citizens, guiding every decision we made. The aliens, though larger and more powerful, seemed almost taken aback by the humans' resilience. They had probably expected us to surrender, to give up at the first show of strength. But the humans didn't give up. As the minutes turned into hours, it was clear that the humans were pushing them back, forcing the alien fleet to retreat in frustration. Our cheers rang out through the shelters as we realized that, for the first time in weeks, we were safe. The human ships, battered but undefeated, hovered over our colony like silent guardians, ensuring that the threat had truly passed before they turned their attention back to us. We expected grand speeches, words of celebration, but the humans simply communicated that the threat was over and that we were free to live in peace again. One day, an unexpected message arrived from a faraway planet we hadn't even known existed. The inhabitants were experiencing a catastrophic natural event, a series of earthquakes that had ravaged their land and destroyed their infrastructure. They were a peaceful, secluded people, untouched by any war, but equally unprepared for such a disaster. Our first instinct was to respond, to rush to their aid with the resources we had. Yet something else weighed on us. This was not a threat we could defeat with ships and shields. This time we were facing nature itself, a force indifferent to alliances or defense strategies. Would our training, rooted in protection and courage, be enough to save lives without needing to battle an enemy? The relief that filled our hearts was immeasurable, but what struck us most was the humility of our saviors. They didn't stay to bask in our gratitude, they didn't expect anything in return. They had come when we called, defended us without question, and now they were ready to leave as quietly as they had arrived. In those final moments, our leaders reached out to the human commander, expressing our deepest thanks and asking if there was anything we could do to repay them. The response that came was simple, almost startlingly so. "Help someone else if you can," the commander said. "That's all we ask." And with that, the human ships turned and disappeared into the stars, leaving us with a sense of awe and a new understanding of courage. We had witnessed something incredible, something that went beyond technology or power. The humans had faced the very force we feared, not because they had to, but because they believed it was right. It was a kind of bravery we had never truly understood before, a willingness to protect others at any cost. In the days that followed, our colonies slowly returned to normal. The scars of fear and uncertainty began to fade, replaced by a newfound determination. Inspired by the humans' selflessness, we began to think differently about ourselves and our role in the galaxy. Despite the risks, we made the decision to send a rescue team equipped with medical supplies, emergency food, and shelters that could withstand tremors. Our fleet arrived at the devastated planet within days, greeted by desolation and silent mountains that seemed to watch us with indifference. The people, fragile and exhausted, emerged from makeshift shelters with looks of hope and fear, unsure if we were truly there to help. We assured them we were friends, and slowly, trust began to form. Our teams worked tirelessly, setting up field hospitals, distributing food, and creating safe zones where families could rest. For days, our only enemy was time, as we struggled to reach those still trapped or isolated by the shifting terrain. As we labored alongside them, the survivors began to share their stories, their culture, their fears. We learned that they had believed themselves to be alone in the universe, unaware that other species existed beyond their skies. To them, our arrival was nothing short of miraculous, an answer to a call they hadn't even known they'd sent. Some of our team members found themselves deeply moved, realizing that they were experiencing the same awe we had once felt when the humans had rescued us. The experience humbled us, reminded us that being a protector wasn't always about defeating an enemy. Sometimes it was simply about standing by those in need, offering support and comfort, showing them they were not alone. Now, whenever we looked up at the stars, we didn't see them as distant or dangerous. Instead, we saw them as places of possibility, realms filled with beings who could help one another. The humans had taught us that we didn't need to be afraid, that unity and bravery could carry us through even the darkest times. And as our colony continued to grow, we kept their words close to our hearts. We knew that someday someone else might need our help, just as we had needed theirs. And when that day came, we would remember what it felt like to be rescued, to be saved when all seemed lost, and we would answer the call without hesitation. After weeks of effort, the planet began to stabilize. The earthquakes subsided, and the people, though still shaken, found themselves rebuilding with a new sense of resilience. As we prepared to leave, their leaders approached us, asking if we would stay in touch, if they could one day join the network of colonies and allies we were slowly building. We agreed, exchanging promises to help each other if the need ever arose again. And as our ships lifted off from their world, we knew that we had not only made allies, we had become a part of something larger, a network of beings bound by compassion, courage, and the memory of those who had once helped us when we were in need. The days after the humans left felt surreal. Our colony, once so gripped by fear, now seemed to be filled with new energy, a fresh purpose born from the depths of our experience. People went about their tasks with a sense of pride and drive that hadn't been there before. Conversations drifted toward the same topic over and over: the humans, how they had fought, how they had stood their ground, and most of all, how they had come to help us without demanding anything in return. Many of us found ourselves wondering, what would we have done without them? What if they hadn't answered our call? A strange curiosity began to grow within our community. We wanted to know more about the humans. We had heard stories, of course, tales of their courage and adaptability. But stories were different from reality, and now that we had seen them with our own eyes, we wanted to learn more. Our scholars began researching their history, their cultures, their philosophies. It was astonishing to us that a species so diverse and, at times, seemingly chaotic, could unite to face a common threat with such unwavering resolve. We learned of their struggles, their wars, their triumphs, and their setbacks. The humans were not perfect, far from it. Yet it was their imperfections, their ability to learn from failure, that seemed to drive them forward. Back in our own colony, the stories of the rescue mission spread quickly, inspiring a new wave of interest in exploration and connection. Our people began reaching out to other planets, some within our own system, others farther away. We sought to share knowledge, exchange ideas, and prepare for a future where we could be of service to those who might one day need it. The bonds we formed were different from alliances based on trade or treaties. They were rooted in a shared understanding, a commitment to stand by one another, to protect and uplift even in the darkest times. As we studied, something unexpected happened. Our own people began to change. It was subtle at first. Small acts of bravery and kindness, gestures that mirrored what we had witnessed during the humans' visit, started to appear in our daily lives. People were more willing to lend a hand, to support one another, to stand up for what was right. The children were especially captivated. They gathered in groups, pretending to be human soldiers defending our world from invaders, imagining themselves as brave as the pilots they had seen streaking across the sky. Our educators noticed it too. The children wanted to learn more, not just about our own history, but about other civilizations, about what it meant to protect something valuable. Then, one day, a transmission arrived from a human ambassador. It was the first direct communication we'd received since the day they had rescued us. The ambassador spoke with warmth, expressing gratitude for the stories they had heard about our efforts. They had learned of our defense force, of the colonies we had helped, of the rescue mission we had undertaken. They wanted us to know that the humans remembered us as allies, and that they were honored to see how we had grown. They invited us to a gathering on a neutral space station, a place where representatives from different worlds could meet, exchange stories, and discuss shared challenges. It was an invitation that filled our community with excitement, for it was not just a chance to meet our human allies again, but also an opportunity to stand as equals, to represent ourselves as protectors and partners. Our delegation prepared carefully, selecting those among us who had been there during the first rescue, as well as newer members of our defense force. When we arrived at the space station, the sight before us was breathtaking. Representatives from dozens of planets and species filled the station, each one unique, yet all gathered with a common purpose. The humans were there too, their uniforms familiar and reassuring, yet there was a warmth and openness in their demeanor that was undeniable. As we moved among them, sharing stories and learning about their cultures, we felt a sense of belonging, of unity, that was unlike anything we had ever experienced. Weeks turned into months, and our small colony began to feel different. Even the way we viewed the galaxy around us changed. Before, the stars had felt distant and indifferent, cold lights that held no meaning. Now they seemed alive with possibility, filled with allies, with other beings who might one day call on us for help. It was as if the humans had unlocked something within us, a sense of responsibility we hadn't fully understood before. We began exploring the idea of forming our own defense force, not an army, but a group trained to protect and assist others, inspired by the selflessness we had seen in the human fleet. The thought of it was both daunting and exciting. Could we, a peaceful colony with little experience in combat, really become protectors? Our leaders debated the idea carefully. Some argued that focusing on defense would only invite more threats, that it was better to maintain a low profile. Others felt that the galaxy was changing and that we needed to be ready to stand up not just for ourselves but for others as well. In the end, the decision was made to begin training a small group of volunteers. They would learn defensive tactics, ways to defuse conflicts, and techniques for helping those in need. The goal wasn't to create warriors, but guardians, people who could protect without causing harm, who could intervene in a crisis without escalating it. The gathering was more than a meeting, it was a celebration of diversity, resilience, and cooperation. We discussed strategies for handling crises, ways to share resources, ideas for fostering understanding between our species. But most importantly, we shared our stories, the tales of how we had been rescued, how we had in turn become rescuers, how we had grown stronger together. The humans listened with pride and respect, their faces lighting up at the similarities between our journey and their own. We realized then that we were all part of a greater story, a story that was still unfolding, driven by the choices we made, the courage we showed, and the bonds we formed. As the gathering drew to a close, a sense of purpose filled the air. We left the space station knowing that we had not only gained allies but had become part of a community of protectors, each one ready to step forward in times of need. Our paths might take us to different stars, to challenges we couldn't yet imagine, but we knew that we would face them together. And as our ships returned home, we felt a renewed commitment to our mission, a dedication to carry the legacy of courage and compassion forward. We were no longer a small, vulnerable colony. We were defenders, explorers, and allies ready to answer any call, no matter how distant. And as the stars stretched out before us, we knew that we would continue our journey, always inspired by those who had come to our rescue and those we had, in turn, helped along the way. As the training program took shape, we encountered challenges. Our people were not accustomed to physical confrontation. to the discipline required for defense, but the desire to learn, to emulate the courage we had seen, pushed us forward. Our volunteers practiced tirelessly, learning how to maneuver, to communicate under pressure, to face their fears. They trained in simulated environments, preparing for scenarios we hoped would never happen but knew we had to be ready for. And with each day they grew stronger, more confident. They became symbols of our colony's transformation, proof that even the most peaceful among us could find the strength to stand tall. One day, a message arrived from a neighboring colony on a distant planet. They had intercepted signs of a possible attack, not unlike the one we had faced. Their message was laced with fear, mirroring our own desperation from that dark time. And in that moment we knew exactly what to do. Without hesitation, our leaders authorized the deployment of our newly trained guardians. It was a decision that filled us with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Would we be able to help them as the humans had helped us? Could we offer the same sense of reassurance and strength? Years later, as we looked back on our journey from a fearful colony to a beacon of hope, an unexpected transmission arrived. It was from the very first humans who had come to our aid, now elderly yet filled with pride at how we'd grown. Their message was simple but powerful. You've become more than we ever imagined at that moment. Under the vast stars, we felt the weight of what we'd achieved. We were no longer just survivors, we were protectors and allies, carrying forward a legacy of courage and kindness that would shine, like the stars, forever.